We're going to have Maya Palic come up, and she's going to be reading to us some of her fiction, A Beast, an Angel, and a Boy.
The forest floor was quiet. Insects were silently skittering about in the low bushes and the high treetops before falling prey to a passing bird. Peaceful though it was, this silence wasn't fated to last. The swift cracking of leaves and twigs beneath boots interrupted the stillness of the forest. Skin of sickly paleness, his underarms were dusted with bloody red irritation. A face young yet brittle with the test of centuries turned to face what caught his eye. Observant, he noticed a drop of sap glistening in the sun against a giant tree. Charcoal-colored brows furrowed and contorted with the realization of the sun becoming visible through the clouds, who never seemed to vacate the area. Legs that of a deer's, the human leapt onto a nearby tree, boots attaching themselves to the dull bark with thick spikes attached to the outsole of a shoe. He scaled the branches, his head now finally above the roof of the forest. If you looked closely, the sun was seen partially rearing her bright head down upon the corpse earth, though she seemed to be holding back her wrath for now. How long had it been since this land had been forsaken by the Almighty? Great-grandmama once told him that her own grandmother could walk through a meadow of vivid flowers without the danger of them fighting back. Had this land ever been anything but gray and in the constant suffocating smog of sulfur? He had a hard time believing her words. The valley's corners and twists had been engraved into the back of his mind since he was young. No, he was already young, he thought. Years passed by, and most seasons tended to blend into one. Aside from horrific snowstorms and infernal heat wraths, the sun was temperamental to the inhabitants of the earth, with the weather rocketing to 100 degrees before plummeting back down to a numbing zero. Fortunately, the witches of his home, the settlement, had invented a way to grow crops underneath the corpse earth, watered by an underground river. Lamps supplemented something called vitamin D to the crops. He sniggered when the witches suggested that the survivors of the settlement themselves should spend a few hours underneath the lamp's beam. Her face was soon concealed by the protective clouds in the sky, and he, deep in his thoughts, had missed his chance thinking about home to appreciate the brief light he had experienced. Now, able to pull himself away, he turned his body to jump back down onto the ashen floor of the forest. It was bizarre that trees grew at all in these dreary lands. The likely explanation was the same magic that the witches used in their spells and technology, the same magic that would cause his skin to itch and burn with constant exposure. The witches, ever wise, had requested of him to search for some new seeds to bring variety to the crops. People went insane with the same bland stew every day, even if it was good for them. Besides, this was his job, to run about the valley and retrieve whatever was needed and run straight back to supply his people, who were safely hidden in the settlement walls. He turned to begin running once more. The valley seemed so small when he ran, the trees warping and blending into each other until something caught his eye. He stopped his predatory chase against non-existent prey to see nothing. The same gray, the same nothing. Sighing, he once again began his darting and dashing. Tough gloves on his hands kept him safe from thorns or vines. A single cut or scrape could mean an agonizing infection, and a washed-out, rustic-hued bandana hung around his neck to pull over his face in case of another ash storm. The dreary green he wore camouflaged him from ferocious beasts that roamed the woods, and his satchel held what he needed. Parkouring himself over roots digging themselves into the earth, fallen logs who seemed to give up on life, peculiar flowers that irradiated an eerie glow, and jagged vines threatening cuts, his running never stopped. In search of those seeds, he was unlucky today. No edible plants had been blessed by the absent gods to their abandoned followers. Finally, with a sharp turn to the right upon reaching the dried riverbed, He saw the stone walls of the valley settlement, a bastion of whatever was left of humanity. Humans stood united with the great leader of the capital so far away. To them, they were far above the pillaging orcs, desperate scavenging goblins, territorial centaurs, hideous fairies, and the forsaken viper people of the northern sea. He was welcomed inside with a mere shout to the gatekeeper, who recognized the familiar cloak marred with the hostile advances of an ever-toxic forest. The iron gates creaked open for the square to come into view. The walls encircled the entirety of the settlement, reaching their peak at the southern end, where they formed into a tower. Witches and their novices would often travel back and forth between the steel doors to enter their laboratory. The full basement layout of the settlement was unknown to him, but he knew there was at least a mile of crops grown by lamps watered by the remains of some river far below the surface. The hushed whispers of townspeople filled his ears. He could also hear the mooing of the two-headed cows trapped within the rickety wooden pen. The adrenaline finally crashing down upon him, he hunched over, breath heaving. He was surrounded by mud houses covered with thatched roofs, the same dried dirt pathways weaving their way through the run-down buildings like a messy tapestry. Fatigued, he ran a hand through his receding dark locks as he trudged forward towards the bulky iron doors, which parted upon sensing his presence. Without another word, he made his way inside. He admired the way the sleek iron was marred with scratches and dirt, perfect yet flawed in so many ways. Reaching into the back of his mind, he remembered that he was to report back to his superior, failure or no failure. He rounded the corner and saw a familiar figure hunched over a few infant plants in small clay pots. A blue light bulb hung over the young plants precariously, attached by wires to the wall. "Dr. Henderson?" he inquired feebly, his voice now breaking the silence.
Thank you, Maya, for sharing your writing with us. For our second performer today, we're going to have Mr. Wise playing a song.
How's everybody doing? Woo. All right. So I'm going to play a song that I've written. So I started doing music, got more serious for me about during the COVID time frame. You guys remember 2020 when we were at home quarantined? Yeah, so the last 6 years or so, I've just kind of committed to getting better at music and songwriting and stuff like that. So I thought I'd play you guys a song today about... I wrote it in 2022, which was 10 years from when I graduated high school back in 2012. And I thought it'd be cool to write a song about high school memories and the things that I remembered back in high school that still stuck with me 10 years later. And at the time that I was writing this song, I had a group of seniors, and I thought it'd be cool to kind of pull them also to get ideas from them about things they thought that they'd remember from high school and things that stuck out to them in their 4 years. So it was kind of a cool collaborative effort of my own experiences, the seniors I had at the time, and then also staff members. I asked for some of their ideas about things they remembered from high school. So kind of a collective song of just, my own nostalgia about my high school years. So any seniors out there? Woo! All right. So if you guys are, and even if you're not seniors, like a lot of these things you can probably still relate to, even if you're not a senior yet, but the time flies when you're in high school. So enjoy it, especially any freshmen out there. It goes fast, enjoy it. So anyway, the song is called Delivered to Your Doorstep, and the reason why I titled it that is because when I was writing it, an Amazon package was delivered to my doorstep. So you never know when a good song title is going to hit you at the right moment. So hope you like it. Times that you laughed, and times that you cried, and there are times that you wish you could just hit rewind 10 years from now, you won't recall that one equation you couldn't solve. Or that paper that you stayed up writing all night long. Go to the flash drive in your mind and you'll find making plans with friends on Friday nights, running through the halls to get to class on time, the day that your diploma finally arrived hidden inside. Memories delivered to your doorstep. You dream of the past, of moments that last, and you find that dreams are your boarding pass to go back 10 years from now. You won't recall hydrogen has just one outer shell. Or the day and month that started the War of 1812. Go to the flash drive in your mind and you'll find coffee runs to Starbucks during lunch, chatting with your favorite teachers to catch up, the day that your diploma finally arrived hidden inside. Memories delivered to your doorstep. Go now, just go now, just go now, oh just go. Go to the flash drive in your mind and you'll find the first slow dance with the one you liked, cheering in the stands under the Friday night lights, the day that your diploma finally arrived hidden inside. Memories delivered to your doorstep. Memories delivered to your doorstep. Thank you. And hopefully those of you that have graduated high school, hopefully that maybe brings back some good nostalgic times from high school. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you again. Today's featured guest won the 2024 Mary Higgins Clark Award for her debut novel, Play the Fool. The follow-up, Tricks of Fortune, was called a delicious blend of suspense and madcap humor by the Library Journal. Her other work has appeared in the Bellingham Review, The Collegist, and Black Fox Literary Magazine. She has also written paranormal romances, award-winning movie reviews, and poems that have not only been published, but have also been read by up to dozens of people. Please welcome Lina Chern.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to be here because I think it's so amazing that your school is providing you with this incredible opportunity to understand a career that I think can sometimes feel a little bit mysterious. When I was in high school, I would have loved an opportunity like this. And by the way, let's have a round of applause for all of the students that have gotten up here and read their work. Really amazing work. Wonderful. It's wonderful. So let me tell you a little bit about, here's my, yes, solving the writing mystery again. I probably should have put this slide up there first. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I spent most of my life in the Chicago area. I've lived in this neighborhood for about 20 years. There's my Fancy Pants author photo, my Fancy Pants book covers. Here I am on TV talking about my work. And here I am wearing a fancy sparkly dress at the Edgar Awards ceremony where I received the Mary Higgins Clark Award for my first book. The Edgar Awards ceremony are kind of like the Oscars of the mystery world. It's like mystery nerd prom. And the reason that I'm starting off with bragging like this is that when I was a kid, when I was about your age, here's me, if you had told me that all of those things were possible for me, I would have thought you were crazy. Now, I very much wanted to be a writer. I very much wanted all those things. But it was never something that I thought a, quote, normal person like me could do. There was certainly not a whole lot of information about it, nothing like this at my high school. I kind of, saw the books in the stores. They looked all glossy and perfect. But there was really this sort of gap, this mystery, this sort of gap of information about how to get from here to there. Plus, I'm from an immigrant family. I was born in the former Soviet Union, and a lot of you might, have similar experiences. As you know, a lot of immigrants that come from places with economic instability have very, very particular ideas about what careers are and are not good for their kids to go into so that they can support themselves. So a career in the arts was not really something that was encouraged in my family. So for me, wanting to be a writer was kind of like wanting to be an astronaut. It was just this very exotic thing that I really didn't think I was going to be able to do. So I'd like to start by sharing with you a bit of this is the first of a few basic principles and tips that I would like to share for anyone who's interested in writing. They're very simple, anyone can do them. They don't involve spending a ton of cash or buying expensive books or getting a fancy degree. The first of them is to read. This is something that you probably already know a lot about, but you can't have writing without reading because they're really part of the same process. Writing just kind of adds an extra step at the end. When you write, you read, you take in information, whether it's a book or in a more general sense, kind of reading the world, observing the people around you. You interpret that information, you make sense of it, and then stage 3, you turn that information back out into the world in your own voice. So when you read, you're already doing those first 2 steps, which are a crucial foundation for that last step. Because before you can put something out into the world, you actually have to observe and process and take something in. If you're just putting out information without really taking information in first, it's not writing, that's social media. So when I was a kid, I loved to read. I was a huge, huge science fiction fan. I didn't actually come to mystery until much later. My favorite writer was this guy, Harlan Ellison. He was this very, very famous science fiction writer. Look at him in his fabulous 1970s finery. I just thought he was fantastic. He was one of these guys who was at least as famous for his personality as for his writing, this very sort of belligerent, rebellious kind of guy. I thought he was so cool. And I read everything of his that I could get my hands on. And it was the first time that I remember thinking, okay, maybe I could kind of try to do what he does. So I tried my hand at it. I tried to write some science fiction stories, but it was really hard. I was never happy with anything I wrote because it wasn't as good as Harlan Ellison or Stephen King or all the other writers that I was reading. And I thought to myself, what am I doing wrong? I knew that I liked writing. I wrote in my journal all the time. I filled notebook after notebook with thoughts, feelings, expressions, and that part was really easy and fun for me. I got a lot of pleasure from it. You know, I couldn't have stopped it if I tried. It was almost like a compulsion. So, you know, this gave me a lot of stress and anxiety. I thought for some reason that even though I had just started out, that I should be writing things that are really good, that I should be as good as someone who had been writing for 30 years. You know, I say this out loud right now and it seems silly to me, but at the time, this is really what I was thinking. So let me ask you a question. Who here is in band? Do we have any musicians? No one's in band? Anyone? Okay, well, my point is, I'm gonna give you an example. You know, my daughter is a musician. She's in band as well. She plays the oboe right now, and she's very, very good because she's been playing for years. When she first started out, back in 5th grade or whenever it was, she was terrible, right? And that's exactly what you'd expect. You pick up your instrument, you don't have any skills, you eventually learn how to play it, you practice, and eventually you get to be good. Well, this is exactly what we would expect, right? Anything that you want to learn to do well, drive a car, fix a car, you know, any kind of skill that you want to do professionally or otherwise is going to take some learning. Writing is no different. And yet, for some reason, we writers, when we start out, put a lot of pressure on ourselves to write perfectly. I think probably because we all kind of have the building blocks of writing built in. We all know how to write our name. We all can you know, write a page of whatever it is we're writing. But in order to write well, that's a skill that takes a lot of practice and patience and time, just like anything else. So I didn't really understand this. I was very, very perplexed by this problem, by this mystery. And so I wrote a letter to Mr. Ellison, my writing hero, to ask him for any advice or what he thought I was doing wrong. You know, I was a very perfectionistic kid. I was very smart. I was a straight A student. It just didn't sit well with me that my writing wasn't good, wasn't perfect. So I hand wrote this letter in a spiral notebook. I ripped it off with all those little raggedy edges still attached. I packaged it up, sent it. Not 2 weeks later, this letter arrived in the mail on fancy stationery with a gold embossed envelope. It was just fabulous. And this letter was absolutely life-changing. Now, Harlan Ellison was kind of a belligerent, angry guy, but he was actually very, very kind to young fans. I think probably because he remembered what it was like to be a weird kid himself with writing ambitions. And this letter was absolutely the kindest, most encouraging thing I could have heard at the time. It said basically what I'm saying to you today. Read, write, work to improve, and have fun. It's a little preview of the rest of my 4 writing tips. And I was absolutely, this was sort of the true beginning of my writing career. And I would love to say that I listened to that advice that he gave me and worked hard and practiced and got better, but I didn't. If anything, this letter actually kind of froze me up, and I started putting even more pressure on myself to write well. So let's zero in on that second tip. So when you're starting out, steal from your favorite writers. Just steal shamelessly. What do I mean by that? I don't mean plagiarize them. I mean imitate them, which is what I was trying to do. Try to write how they write. If you read a horror story, a vampire story, or something like that, try to write your own vampire story. Try to see what they were doing in that story that you liked so much and recreate it. It's not really stealing because you're going to put your own spin on it, whether you are trying to or not. And that will be the beginning of your own writer voice. The second one, write badly. This is going to sound silly, but it's very, very important. You will absolutely not be writing well when you first start out. That's okay. Keep going. Keep trying. Because what happens when you don't practice your instrument? You don't get better, just like in band. The more you write, the more practice you put in, the better eventually your writing is going to be. Be patient. Be nice to yourself. This is something I wasn't doing. All of those things that Harlan Ellison told me to do that I kind of ignored. So let's flash forward a little bit. Oh, actually, before we get to the next stage, I did actually have a few successes in high school that I was pretty proud of. I won a contest when I was a sophomore in high school. The prize was to spend a year watching free movies on the dime of the Chicago Tribune and writing a weekly movie review article based on them. So there's my face in my byline with a that photocopy of that article. There I am, looking very smug and pleased with myself when I won the contest. One of my articles actually got picked up and used in a writing textbook for high schoolers. It was a review of Terminator 2, which I thought was deeply inferior to the original. I had a lot of opinions about these things. So this is a nice reminder to put your writing out there. It's not too early to start seeing what your writing can do out in the world. There are writing contests at the library, in the larger world. There are publications that specialize in publishing work by younger writers. So you can start practicing kind of getting your writing out there early on. Okay, so flash forward to college. Here's me and my roommate being silly. I studied English and creative writing, and I still am kind of amazed that I managed to get my parents to agree to this because they were, of course, convinced that I was going to be starving in the street. Spoiler alert, I did not starve in the street. English is a common major to study in college, creative writing. Some others are journalism, communications, media. Here's the thing, though. You don't have to study anything in particular to write. You don't even have to go to college. Some of our most celebrated writers like Mark Twain, Maya Angelou, Charles Dickens, Ray Bradbury, one of my absolute favorites when I was a kid reading science fiction. None of these writers ever went to college. College is useful mostly because it really forces you to work on those first two building blocks, reading and writing. You'll be exposed to a lot of literature, which is kind of how it's very important that you see a lot of examples for how it's done. And it forces you to write. And it also introduces you to some other more advanced skills, although, again, you can find those skills anywhere. Just a quick aside to say that in college, this is how terrified I was to write still. I concentrated on poetry in college, literally because I thought writing shorter pieces would be easier. It was not. If anything, and those of you out there who write poetry know this, poetry can actually be a lot harder because you really have to make every word count. There's no room for error. And I'm actually, in retrospect, grateful that I started writing poetry because it, to this day, makes me kind of obsessed with every word. I will sit there, even when I'm writing my longer works, and make sure that every single word is doing what I want it to do. And that really that's your craft. Language is your material, just like a sculptor uses clay. And manipulating it to artfully tell the reader what it is you're trying to tell them, that's your craft. So poetry really served me well in that regard. Some of these other tips that you might learn in college or anywhere else, you kind of start to advance your writing skills, can all be put under the category of keep writing. That first one. Get feedback. Okay, for some of you, this is a very, very important part of the process. For some of you, college, if you choose to go that way, will be your first exposure to a writing workshop, which is the way that a lot of classes in college are run. You bring a piece of writing to class, the other students, led by the professor, will give you feedback on it. That can be very scary. That might be the first time you kind of put your writing out in front of someone to read it. But it's very, very important, and I'll tell you why. When you start writing, it's kind of all about you. It's all about expressing your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. Eventually, you're going to start to understand that writing, or at least good writing, is less about you than it is about your readers. about what your readers can take from your work. And so the challenge becomes, once again, to bring across what you're trying to tell them in a way that will satisfy not just you, but them. So, fun little story, I actually used to run the creative writing workshop right down the street at Cook Library. And the thing that I noticed about a lot of newer writers when they would come to the workshop and share their work for the first time was that when they would get feedback, they would try to push back on it. They would argue with it. And this isn't to say that all feedback you're going to get is going to be good, but here's what I always tried to tell them when I would get that kind of pushback. I would say, you know, when you've published a book and your book is on the shelf at Barnes & Noble and a reader picks it up and reads something in it that you didn't really intend to be there, are you going to be there to pop out of the book and correct their thinking? No, you're not. Which is why it's very important for you to work really hard before that book gets out there to make sure that you're saying something exactly the way you want it to come across. Because once you finish your writing, you're not there anymore. You lose that. I don't want to say lose, but that book is no longer yours. It belongs to the reader. So it's very important that you get that back and forth beforehand to make sure you're saying what you want to say. Once you get that feedback, revise. That revision is so important, and it's a part of the process that isn't really talked about later, or very much while you're doing it. And I'll tell you later some of the stages that my own novel went through before it finally got to the shelf. Okay, so after college, I wanted to keep writing, but my family had drilled into me that I needed a steady job with a steady income. And so I actually got some work doing writing-related things. And there are all kinds of ways to be a professional writer that don't involve writing literature if that's not the way you want to go. I've been lucky enough to do just about every kind of professional writing there is, and I started here. So, for example, I wrote trivia questions for a game company. It's actually the game company that became Jackbox Games, if you're familiar with them. I wrote for a television show that was based on one of our games. I worked for a long time at a company that made those noisy educational toys that a lot of you probably played with when you were kids. Now, that was a really fun job. We actually did a lot of work with licensed characters like Disney and Warner Brothers. So I did things like write children's books based on those characters. There's one that's based on Scooby-Doo. I also wrote user manuals for the games. I wrote the stuff that went on the back of the box. I did all kinds of things. Some of it was fun, some of it was not so fun, but it was interesting work, and it gave me a good idea of how one can write professionally without necessarily writing literature. Now, in the meantime, I was still trying to write poems and short stories because even though my work was fun, I really, that wasn't where I felt like my heart was. I was still trying to write literature, and I had a few successes, a few publications, but I just felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere. Because when I was a kid, when I fantasized about being a writer, what I really wanted was not to be rich and famous or have a bunch of awards and all this stuff. What I was chasing after was that pleasure of writing that I felt when I wrote in my journal. I just felt like, Mr. Ellison talked about in his essays, he talked about how when he wrote, it was all about the writing. He would get into these writing trances where the rest of the world just fell away, and all he wanted to do was to get back to the story and see where it led him next. Well, I felt that way when I wrote in my journal, but I never felt that way when I was actually trying to write something for an audience. And I was starting to feel like maybe my opportunity to be a writer was going away. I started to feel like maybe I just wasn't meant to be a writer. Until something magical happened. So when I was still working at the toy company, my son, who was about 3 at the time, was diagnosed with autism. And my family made the tough decision to have me quit my full-time job and stay home with him full-time because his care got to be too much. And I realized that we were pretty lucky, pretty privileged in order to be able to make this kind of decision. It's not really an option that's available to everyone. But when my son got a little bit older and went to school, and I had a bit more time, I decided I would try to pick up some short-term freelance work while I had some time. And I came across this ghostwriting job. Now, ghostwriting, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is basically writing work that someone else will put their name on. It's just another type of professional writing that is available to you if you have writing skills. So this job required me to write a series of paranormal romance stories where a psychic woman who sees dead people, with the help of ghosts, helps her hot FBI boyfriend solve crimes. Kind of a silly idea, but it was a job, so I settled down and I did it. And I had to write these stories fast on a deadline, which is often how professional work is done. I had to turn these stories around lickety-split, just one after another, bang, bang, bang. I had no time to worry about making them perfect. I had no time to worry about even making them good. And who cared, right? My name wasn't even going to be on them. See, I don't know who Sandra Ross and Eden LaRue are. I don't think they exist. But it was like I turned a corner at that point. It was like the skies opened up and the rains came. Because all of a sudden, I was literally staying up nights to finish these stories. I finally experienced that pleasure that I'd been chasing all those years. I just couldn't wait to get back to it, to figure out where the story went next. I was having so much fun manipulating language, trying to give the reader the experience of my own thoughts. Finally, I had achieved what I had always wanted to. And what was different? What was different was that I took all that pressure off myself. All of those ideas that I had had about needing to be perfect, needing to have my writing good right away, just finally fell away because I didn't care anymore about making it good. And that was when I finally discovered what I believe to be the solution to this writing mystery, which is to have fun. This is, again, the most important component of all. If you don't figure out how to have fun writing, you're not really going to get anywhere because you won't be able to motivate yourself to keep going. There's going to be no deadline, no class, no fancy laptop or writing software that will make you write if you're not enjoying the process. If, on the other hand, you have found what makes writing fun for you, nothing will stop you. Because basically we do what feels good. That's just human nature. So if you want to write, I talk to a lot of young writers who say the same things that I did when I was their age. I want to write, but I just can't seem to get anywhere. If you want to write, find a way to do it that feels good. If you haven't yet, keep looking, keep exploring, because what's fun for another writer might not necessarily be fun for you. There are as many processes as there are writers. For me, for example, writing in my journal was always easy and fun. That was how I knew that I was a real writer, was because I really enjoyed that part of it. I never had to force myself to do that. So even now, if I'm struggling to write, if I come across some part of my story or novel that isn't working, that I can't quite figure out, I go back to what feels good. I sit down and I start journaling about the problem, not caring about putting it into the story or that anyone's going to read it. I just start to puzzle it out in my mind. I just write down thoughts, ideas, anything that will help me kind of work through this problem. And invariably, my mind settles in, and before I know it, the journal entry becomes the story itself. For me, there's something about the slowness of handwriting and the feel of the pen on the paper that feels really good in kind of a sensory way. And that helps me turn off that internal editor that kind of keeps me from writing. So that may work for you. That's a tip that I often give young writers. But whatever it is that makes you feel good, whatever tricks you can use to kind of turn off that internal editor, go for it. And eventually you won't need the tricks. You'll train your mind to kind of get to that place on its own. Okay. So at that point, I decided I would try to write a novel on my own. And these are kind of scenes from, it took me, I kid you not, 10 years to write this novel, on and off. But I kept going because I knew I could do it. I knew that I already had done it, and I was enjoying it, and I could keep working on it. So I filled a lot of notebooks. I talked to some local police officers to figure out how law enforcement works, since my stories are mysteries, they're based on law enforcement. I researched tarot cards. I did a lot of everything that I just told you about. I read, I wrote, I revised and kept working, and I had fun. And eventually, here's me with my pre-publication copies of my finished novel. And just a quick rundown, I won't go through the whole publication process, but that novel was rewritten no less than 8 times. And again, you see this glossy cover here, you see this glossy finished novel, you don't really see anything that came before, and all of the hard work that I put into it. And again, that's the part that's kind of mysterious that no one ever talks about. So for me, the solution to the mystery was something that I'm going to let my close personal friend Taylor Swift tell you about herself in her own words. If I can. Here we go.
I would love to tell you that this is the best moment of my life, but I feel this happy when I finish a song, or when I crack the code to a bridge that I love, or when I'm shot listing a music video, or when I'm rehearsing with my dancers or my band, or getting ready to go to Tokyo to play a show. For me, the award is the work. All I want to do is keep being able to do this. I love it so much. It makes me so happy. It makes me unbelievably blown away that it makes some people happy who voted for this award too. All I want to do is keep doing this. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do what I love so much.
Thank you, Taylor Swift. And that, I couldn't have said it better myself. That is the solution to the mystery. Enjoy writing, have fun. The work is its own reward. Thank you very much. Do you have time for questions? Anyone have any questions for me in the time we have remaining? Okay. Anyone? Yes. You know Taylor Swift? I do not know Taylor Swift. I wish I did, but I don't. I just borrowed her words this time. Anyone else? No? Okay.
Thank you to Lina Chern.
Thank you, everyone.